Welcome everybody to Spirit Matters. I'm so glad you're joining with us. I'm Dayal along with Kishore Go no, not Kishore Gopal. You're Kishore Chandra. I was texting Kishore Gopal this morning.
Me too.
Yeah. Oh, I feel less
Yeah.
special, but that's okay. Um and Kishore Chandra, the beautiful Chandra means moon. And Achyuta Gopi back from her allergy in infirmary. But we're glad that you're with us. How you doing, Achyuta?
Much better than the past 2 days. If you've never had your sinuses rule your life, 10 on 10, do not recommend.
Okay, don't do that. Is it something related to weather, or just comes and goes when it's cold, when it's raining, when it's...
Definitely it's weather. And then it kicks up allergies, and then allergies kick up asthma, and then like it triggers a whole then they do this cycle thing. Then they switch off. They're very good at cooperating on making my life miserable.
They got it down?
I wish I could cooperate that well, you know?
Yeah. You have asthma.
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah,
have asthma,
I didn't even
Kishore?
know until recently.
No, you don't. I don't know. Well, I'm so glad that you're better and that you're feeling okay and
Yeah.
that you're back with us. Yeah. Kishore and I, we just kind of moped around the last couple days. I'm
I
really
heard
glad.
some things.
How are you this morning, Kishore?
I'm doing great. I started a juice fast because I felt like I needed it, and I'm feeling very clear and present.
Did you start yesterday?
I started yesterday, yeah.
What juice you drinking?
Right now, I am drinking celery, pineapple, ginger, apple, and spinach.
Oh my God, that sounds so good.
Yeah.
And are you making it yourself?
Yeah, I'm making it myself. Yeah.
How long you going?
I think I'm gonna go till Gore Pernim.
That's in 8 days.
Yeah.
Okay. All power to you. If you don't show up tomorrow morning, you know what happened.
You'll know why.
We'll know why.
I'll be crawling to the juice machine.
He ran out of celery. Beautiful. Well, just to catch up with you, this week we've been kind of talking about, I don't know if you had a chance to if you know anything that we talked about, but we've been talking a little bit about Sangha and the importance of having Sangha. And yesterday specifically, we were talking about the idea of being of service and this kind of concept of how, spiritually, the idea of being a servant materially is kind of like a very distasteful idea. Or because there's a lot of connotations with oppression, suppression, exploitation, um, lack of freedom, etc. But in spiritual life, we, especially in Bhakti and in the Vedic tradition, this idea of the dharma of the soul being constitutionally geared towards service. And the question isn't whether do I want to be of service or not, but what am I in service to? Whether it's society or my family or my ego or my body or my urges or my addictions or my higher self. And so that process of self-discovery leads us towards actually making a decision of where do I want to direct this serving propensity that is in all living beings. My dog does this really well. He always brings gifts. I think gift giving is his love language. And so it's like whenever he never comes to the party empty-handed. We're in the other room and he wants to come and cuddle, and it's like he's got to find something first, a little toy, a little rice bone, whatever it is. He's like, when he comes and shoves it in your face. It's like he always comes with something. And so whether animal, beast, human, there's this propensity to we carry a service mentality. And so that's kind of where we left off. Did I miss anything, Kishore?
No, that's
Yesterday's
perfect.
episode was titled Who do you serve?
And
So
I
who do
think
you
it's
serve?
interesting. I think it's interesting. I want to hear from Achyuta because we haven't heard from her literally for the past 2 days, and I miss her. But it's so
4 days because it
interesting.
was a weekend.
Oh, 4 days. Oh my God. I need to hear you, Achyuta.
Achuta
But
fast. You're on a juice fast. The rest of the world's on an achuta fast.
I can't do an Achyuta fast. I need Achyuta every day.
Pasha's loving it. She's in our live audience. She can't get enough. She just can't get enough of it.
The one thing I was gonna say was that it's so interesting because also in our history and in our bhakti history, I've been reading a lot about the Goswamis, who are these six saints of Vrindavan that very much promulgated the teachings of bhakti after Lord Chaitanya left the world. But I was reading specifically about this one, Gopal Bhatta Goswami, and it was so interesting. Just like this mood of humility is really interesting because it's not service so that I can do the service and then feel good about the service, and then I'm like, look at me, I'm serving everyone, I'm awesome, and now I've outserved you all. I've won, the service competition. We were talking about the Great British Baking Show too, Achyuta.
That was also a big part of the discussion.
That was. And I was just reading about this saint who he really, really, really wanted to be like in the background. He didn't want his name mentioned in books. He like really wanted to just be the servant of the servant. Like he really embodied that. And I was reading that and I was just like, whoa, like that's really a high level. And how do we even do that or get there, in this
Mm.
kind of world? Like it seems so far away to be able to do that because when you serve, there's always a little bit of like, yeah, I did that. I want to hear your take on it, Achyuta.
The great Vedic chant off. Everyone's like getting together, they're chanting, doing their meditating, like, woo, get ready, go. Be a lot less commentary on that show.
It airs on Akadashis.
It airs on.
Everybody's trying to like race towards like 64 rounds. So I got to hear some of it, which is really, really cool. And it always makes me think about how caught up we are. And I think that we are all living through many different levels of identity crises. And I was just thinking how, there are so many topics that we've gone through in this podcast. And every one of them that we talk about, especially even with this idea of service, we are constantly looking so much for identity that whatever it is, even if we serve, that then becomes our entire identity. It's like, oh, you serve that, then you align with all these things. And then it's like us hoping to God that whatever it is that we've chosen to serve does not do anything sketchy. Because then all of a sudden that comes crashing down on our entire like identity. And I was just kind of thinking about that and why that is. And I think that it was so important that you kind of bring up the constitutional nature of the soul. Like the constitutional nature of the soul is to serve. We have all of these inbuilt desires and inbuilt identity markers, etc. And even in the spiritual world, your service becomes your identity. If you think about, and you were talking about the concept of das anudas yesterday, which I love. But even if we think about it in terms of serving, your name, even as das or dasi, becomes your new identity. It's like, well, who do you serve? It's like, well, I serve a Krishna who is so blissfully youthful and effulgent like the moon. It's like, well, who do you serve? And it becomes part of your identity. It becomes part of who you are, made up the fabric of all of who you are. And even in the, like I said, in the spiritual world, who you serve denotes a particular group of people with a particular mood of service toward Krishna, a particular relationship with a special grouping of pastimes. Like it talks about what your mood is, even like you can, by who people serve and who they associate with, you even know how like fiery or calm they are. Like, it gives you an idea of exactly who you are just by who you serve and associate with. And I think that we've been materially kind of looking for that same thing. The problem is when you get to the material world, because it's a perverted reflection, everything gets a little wonky. It's like Outer Limits or the Twilight Zone, where everything you think is going okay, and then it takes this really weird turn every time. Every time. Even when you get in touch with the most right things, all the rightest things that you could be in touch with, it's like it always takes a left turn. It's like, why is it always taking this crazy left turn? It's like, this material world, like, sorry, that's a hazard. Like, it's always going to be a little bit wonky and weird and out there. And I kind of love this idea of looking at service, looking at our lives, looking at who we are, and then having to kind of break away and say, okay, but at some point I'm gonna have to be flexible enough to understand that my actual identity might be unable to fit inside the small confines of whatever box I'm placing it in, because it's the material world. And our constitutional natures are also ones of eternality. They're also constitutional natures that are so unlimited. You can't fit inside this tiny one little box because ultimately we're not meant to be here.
Mm. Yeah, the thought that was coming to my mind also as you were sharing was the concept almost of the freedom to serve. Um, because, there is, when we think about freedom itself of like, I can do whatever I want, but then there are things that when I do whatever I want, naturally certain actions take away my freedom. You can break a law and all of a sudden you are in prison and you're no longer able to do what you want because you previously thought you could just do whatever you want, or you do whatever you want. Now you've become every action that we perform creates a conditioning towards doing something similar again. And so now the actions I'm performing are conditioning me in a certain way that remove my ability to make free choices in the future. And so this kind of almost this reclaiming of the soul's choice to direct my serving propensity where I want it to go is a tremendous act of liberation. As opposed to this, if we acknowledge that there's this serving propensity that is influenced by the things and people around me, and everything is flowing me to move in this way and to serve these types of things, then I'm not actually free. The freedom isn't in removing myself from the serving propensity. The freedom is in actually bringing myself to a place where I am choosing for myself where I want to direct that propensity, and I'm able to actually liberate myself in such a way that I can direct myself there. Because you may want to direct your serving propensity, but because of your own conditioning, you're just not able to. Because of the ways that you've been, the choices you've made previously, the choices I've made previously have now conditioned me in such a way that I can't even make the choices I want to make anymore. I'm too conditioned to eat that, to see that, to go there, to say that, to whatever it may be. And so I was just kind of thinking of this freedom to serve, and that kind of that reclaiming that just saying it again, that our freedom isn't in removing ourselves from that serving propensity, but it's in reclaiming for ourselves and taking the step back and be like, where do I want to direct this? And if we don't choose, then and I think that's where it gets wonky in the material world, like you said, Achyuta. It gets wonky when we just let that choice get made for us unconsciously by society, by our social circles, by whatever it may be, political parties. Like, we just kind of like let it flow, and then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, where did I end up? And I think that the difference between spiritual and material consciousness is that taking a step back to be aware of that and be conscious and intentional for ourselves. Jeff said, so our free choices are actually a graduated sieve, like a sieve, like you sieve flour or something, right? Like you sieve that limits the variety of future free choices. Quote unquote free choice. I had to read that like twice, Jeff. Our quote unquote free choices are actually a graduated sieve that limits the variety of future free choices. Yes. I'm not going to unpack that because I feel like I'd botch it, but I feel like it's well said.
Or
I think
expand.
Yeah, I think it's like such a great statement that Jeff made, because it's really interesting, the idea of freedom, and people thinking that they're making free choices. And I think that's where it gets wonky. Like, I really like this word that Achyuta used, because if we're living in a society where everyone is making free choices, but actually those choices, like, I guess the question comes down to like, are they even choices? Like, at what point do they stop becoming choices and it just becomes like almost automatic, right? Because the sieve of the free choices has basically conditioned me into just doing the same thing over and over again that I think is free, but it's actually not. It's kind of crazy.
We're getting Matrix mode here.
Yeah, we're getting Matrix
We're
mode.
going into the Matrix.
Or
Take us through the Matrix or
Or-
out of the Matrix. Okay, where are we going, Achuta?
or what if? So I'm always like, asking these questions like worst possible outcome, right? Like how do we plan for that? Um I'm like, or what happens when you have decided what you serve, what you stand for, where you are, like what your hard stops are, only to realize that the entire system is built not for that to succeed. I'll give you an example. What if, like, we've all talked about it, like we've been in some form of public service at some point, and you're trying to make strides through public service. And then what happens when you realize that the whole system is kind of built for this public service not to succeed in the way that you thought it would? Right? You come in with these idealistic, bright, shiny ideas of how this is going to succeed and how you're going to make changes and differences. Then what happens when you realize that the system is not built for that? That can lead you to becoming really, really depressed, because then you're like, well, it's a lose-lose situation. Whatever I do, I'm just kind of stuck. And I feel like souls are coming to this kind of realization about the spiritual world. It's like, well, I have to serve. And then all of a sudden, what you're telling me is that with this, the way karma is built, that I'm going to make choices that are going to further entangle me in worse situations. Material nature is like, yes. And you're like, well, then there's no winning. How do I win? And she's like, there is only one winning. You get the heck out. Get out of the cycle.
Hmm.
And then, but we're like, no, but I gotta make this matrix work. Like I've gotta crack this code and figure this out. Material nature is like, that's crazy. Get out. Like the whole system is meant for us to get so frustrated that we get out of the situation. And we're like, I won't get out. I will stubbornly figure this out. And material nature and Krishna both are like, we've been trying. We've been trying to like guide and steer and lead. Like we've been trying hard. If you could just let go of that idea and understand that there's actually a better situation than this system, which is not built to house your loyalty and your allegiance. Like this is not where your allegiance lies. Put it over here. We're like, or what if I change that system and then I put my allegiance? Like you've literally been doing this for lifetimes. So yeah, I've been like, or what happens when you realize that, yeah, the system is rigged. Yeah, there's going to be systemic oppression. Yes, that systemic oppression is going to have been existed since the beginning of time. And then you're like, well, what's the point of me making all these choices? The point was, get out.
I got thoughts coming in, but I wanted to give Kishore a chance if you wanted to say something.
No, I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear your thoughts, Dale.
I had a thought, and then when I deferred to you, I let it go, and now I have to bring it back. Yes, I think 100% that there is this sense of, there's a principle in psychology that Rukmini Potter said, getting out can seem like running away. How do we see it as not running from our problems? Yes. There's a principle in psychology that there's a point in which when we've invested so much in something, even when it's not working, there's almost this sense of like it's a loss to walk away, and therefore I need to figure out how to make it work. It happens in relationships. I've invested so much in this relationship, it'd be such a shame to walk away. And it's like, well, if it's not working, actually, you're better off cutting your ties and moving on than trying to make some, or a business decision. It's like gambling works like that. Well, I've already lost like, $100, $1,000, however much money. And it's like, I might as well just push a little bit more, put a little bit in so I can get it back, because otherwise if I walk away, I just get nothing. Well, actually, if you stay another 20 minutes, you're going to have less than nothing. And so it's like this kind of concept that sometimes when we've invested so much into something, it's the more we've invested in something, the harder it is for us to accept that it's time to walk away. And I think that we have invested so much lifetime after lifetime into making this material world work. It's so hard for us to wrap our minds around that. And I think as that one of my favorite verses of all time from all of Vedic literature is Queen Kunti, Akinchita Gochidam, where she says that my dear supreme Lord, you are easily approachable, but only by those who are materially exhausted. Like I'm actually exhausted by my ego, by other people's egos, by trying to make certain things work when they're not meant to work, by trying to find true love in the material world, by trying to find peace and harmony and places where it's yes, okay, it's learning how to dance in the rain. Like, okay, I'm dancing in the rain, I'm still tired, and it's just it's hard. And I think that when we get to that place of recognizing that this is it's a broken system. The material world is a broken system. And when you brought up social, I was thinking like social work, because Kishore, you've done social work, and I think a lot of the burnout that comes in the social work field is when you realize that certain systems are built to be broken. The foster care, I interned for a year at a foster care system. It's like the foster care system is broken in the United States. Our prison systems are broken, or in one sense, they're not broken. They're working the way they were designed to work, just not the way we think they were supposed to work. So the material was working, just not the way we think it was supposed to work. And in terms of what Rukmini just said, because there's a lot of beautiful comments coming in here in our chat box. And the first one was Rukmini said, getting out can seem like running away. How do we see it as not running from our problems? I think it really goes back to defining what it means to get out. Because if I'm running away from my problems, I'm not getting out. It's not a physical thing that I'm running away from. It's an internal consciousness that I'm bringing, where I can actually completely stay. And that's the message of the Gita. Arjuna 100% stayed in his circumstance, but he got out of the mentality that he had. So it's getting out of the mentality that we have. And sometimes the problems that are presented for us are exactly built for us to develop the right mentality and transform internally. So it's not about just being like, screw it, I'm out of here, because that's what Arjuna wanted to do in the Bhagavad Gita, where he wanted to run away from the battle. And Krishna's like, dude, your nature is a warrior. If you go to the battle, you're going to end up fighting with a deer. Like, that's who you are. Like, you're going to set up camp in somewhere. Like, you're not going to run away from who you are. So you can never run away from who you are. But it's about approaching things with a different consciousness and mentality. And again, I think that mentality related to the concept of service is not what can I get out of it? Because the material world is not designed to fulfill our desires and make us happy. It's designed to make us realize that we are parts of a much bigger whole. Our greatest happiness comes in serving the center of that whole, which is not us. We are not the center. And it's meant to kind of recalibrate our consciousness. And just like Pashya said, I'll end here because I'm just going through the comments. Is it because we don't want to give up trying to be God? Exactly. We don't want to try giving up that post position of like, and we talk about, I'm not trying to be God, but anytime I feel like I'm trying to be in the center, that's actually me trying to play a position that's reserved for higher self, higher being, higher power, for God. And actually, and the catch-22, not the catch-22, but the reverse thinking about it that normally isn't intuitive is that I actually derive more sense of meaning and fulfillment when I'm serving the center rather than trying to be the center. That's what I got.
It's amazing. I feel like your guys' is groupie today. I'm just here like, yes, preach, give it to me. Yes, yes. I feel like you summed it up so nicely, Dayal. This idea that we gain more satisfaction by serving the center than trying to be in the center. And I think that that's really, these past few days we've been talking about service and community. That's where it all ties in. The nature of the soul is to serve. because we're trying to serve the center. And when we're trying to serve someone else, another devotee, a partner or whatever, we're serving divinity that lives inside of their heart, you know. And so it's really interesting when it comes to for some reason this is coming up for me, but like relationship, you know, relationship is so interesting, whatever types of relationships they are, relationships in communities, with your parents, with friends, with significant others. It's so interesting because it's such a microcosm of all of this that we've been talking about, because you realize, like, wait a minute, what am I trying to get out of this? Like, am I trying to get something from this? Am I trying to be the center, or am I trying to make the other person the center? Am I like it really gives you a perspective of where you're at and how you're approaching service. Because if not if serving the whole, like you said, Dayal, it brings more happiness and more contentment. But something that I feel like is difficult to do in the material world sometimes, because it's the material world and, you know, Maya, is we forget. We forget to serve the whole. And we end up serving our senses, we end up serving our ideologies, we end up serving, you know, all of these other things that are gonna just like keep us. And, you know, I like this comment that Rukmini made, and I like the way that you really explained it, in terms of Arjuna, because yeah, Arjuna wanting to go off into the forest and just kind of be dejected and not deal with society. It's exactly what we're saying is not the answer, and what Krishna is saying is not the answer. And rather, like you were mentioning, it's like you have to stay and serve your dharma and change your mindset. And so I think that this is super interesting, and why bhakti is such a universal language, actually, and it's such a universal practice, because it's not leave everything you're doing, leave your job, just stop everything you're doing and let's move to the ashram, you know, like that's not what bhakti is saying. It's really like, keep doing what you're doing, because this is your lot, in a sense, right? Like, you came into this world, you came with this family, you're in the situation that you're in, so keep doing what you're doing, but change the mindset around what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that is hard. It's hard, but I think that with community, with sangha, with all of you, I think we're able to actually just remind ourselves, because that's where we forget, and then we're not changing the mindset because we forget, and then we end up, you know, serving our senses or ideologies or whatever.
Hmm. Can I tell a quick story and then get some takeaways from Kimberly and then have some closing words from Achuta?
Yes.
This is Jamuna Jai's story. I don't know where she got it from, but it was a story of I don't know, it's like a parable or not a true story that I'm aware of. Um, and there was somebody who died, and they went to, you know, the gates of the afterlife, and they were given the option of going to heaven or hell. And they first got to, well, let me see what each one looks like. And he was given a vision of hell, and there was all these people sitting at a long table, like a dinner table, and there was like elaborate, beautiful, ornately decorated food and dishes and sitting in front of them, but everybody was just like utterly like emaciated and like drooping faces and like sticks and bones, and wasn't quite sure why. And then he saw that they went to try to eat, and all of them had elongated, very long arms, but no elbows. They couldn't bend their arms. And so this food was right in front of them, but they couldn't actually like bend. Why is that funny, Pasha? Pasha's laughing at my story. Maybe because I'm doing the motion of the arms. This is a very serious thing here.
I'm
It's
scared. I'm not laughing.
not scared. Yeah, she's in last. And so they couldn't bend their arms, and so they couldn't actually pick up a fork and put it in their mouth and feed themselves. So all this beautiful food was there, but none of them could eat it. And he was like, "That's hell." And then he showed, okay, let me get a glimpse of heaven. And so then he went and he saw the same scenario, and there was this long table with all these foods, but the people seemed completely filled and were vibrant and healthy and and nourished and happy. And he saw that the same situation, they had the same elongated arms, and they couldn't bend their elbows. And it was like, what happened? And then he saw when it was time to eat that they were sitting across the table, that each person would pick up food and they would feed the other person across the table. And that's how they ate. I can't feed myself, but I can feed you. And so the sense of like, oh, I get it. In heaven, everybody serves each other. And when we talk about, like heaven or hell being physical places, a whole nother story. But like Rob Bell is a Christian, super controversial. He wrote this book, Love Wins, on whether hell and heaven is our physical places somewhere, whether it's like a concept of consciousness. Is where we often describe it as consciousness. And so being able to create the spiritual world even in this life, but it's where I'm looking to serve, and somehow I get nourished through that. That's my little story. And Jeff said, sounds like a Guillermo del Toro scene. Yes, it does.
Exactly. I was thinking of Pan's Labyrinth. I was like,
Well,
what's
he wrote that he made that movie The Platform, which is somewhat similar and kind of grotesque. Anyways, I'm always looking at Pasha's facial expressions to see how I'm doing and what I'm sharing. Let's get some takeaways from Kimberly. Then I really want to hear a closing word from Achyuta, because we've been sharing a little bit. You got anything for us, Kimberly? And if anybody else has any takeaways or phrases or words that they want to put in the chat, we'll read them out too.
The material world is wonky.
That's a good one. Amen.
The more we invest in something, the harder it is for us to walk away. We have spent lifetimes trying to make material life work, but at some point we gotta get out the matrix and step into a higher mentality and consciousness of serving the whole.
Beautiful. Thank you. And Jeffrey put, recalibrate our consciousness. Achyuta, you got a closing word or words for us as we walk away?
I was just gonna say that I think that it's so important to remember exactly what you said in that last one. And that's also, they give that example as like a folkloric lesson in the Mahabharata as well. Like
Maybe that's where she got
at
it.
a certain point they have all the like Kurus and the Pandavas, and they're all like fighting and whatnot, and they try to make them stop fighting. And they're like, how do you eat if your arm is just permanently outstretched? How do you eat if you can't bend at the elbow? And the kids all find a way to like try and figure it out. And then I think it's finally like Yudhishthir who's like, you feed somebody else. It would work if you just and then it does work, except for, as far as I know, Duryodhana is still a jerk and refuses to feed anybody else. Sorry. But there's like this idea of, oh my gosh, society just started telling me that I should love myself, and now what you're telling me is that in order to properly love myself and others, that I've got to serve everybody else, and what actually happens to me if I do that. And I think that that's a constant worry, even in Bhagavad Gita. Like Arjuna's constantly kind of like, I get what you're saying, Krishna, but what happens to me? And what I love is the answer is never just like, that's it. You wash somebody else's dishes until you die. That's like the goal of life. I love how, Krishna's always like, then I'll take care of you. And we hear in like, Bhagavatam, like the, cardinal verse, Savai pung sang paro dharmo, ito bhaktiro dokshaje, ahaitaki, apratyata yatma suprasiditi. Like to actually give true, lasting, authentic happiness to the soul is to engage in service to somebody else, because Krishna never leaves you high and dry. Like in that spirit of service and engaging with the divine, Krishna's never like, and then you keep on serving like this until you die of boredom. He's like, no, you serve. He's like, and then I take care of everything. Like Krishna loves to uplift and build up, and even then in reciprocation, serve his devotees. So I love that Krishna's like, and then you think, I'm serving the center and it's this separate identity. He's like, no, it's not. He's like, you serve the center and then I make it the best experience that you've ever had in your life.
Beautiful. There's so much more coming to my mind. I want to share in analogies, but we're out of time. Pasha thinks we should label this episode the Broken Elbow Challenge. Rukmini's down for that challenge. Nobody go break your elbows. We're going to be getting mail. I broke my elbow and I'm still not happy and fulfilled. Not self-realized. Like, no, Vedic double dare, Jeff says. We love you guys so much. Please, please, please do take care. Be well. Nourish yourself, and tell somebody that you love them today. It's important. They'll appreciate it. We love all of you. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow, same time, same place. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.